October 26, 1942. 730 miles northeast of Guadalcanal. The last flight deck of American carrier aviation is burning. Lieutenant Commander James flatly watches from his cockpit as USS Hornet lists 20 degrees to starboard. Massive fires consume over 300 feet of her flight deck. Japanese bombs have punched clean through the hangar bays. Torpedoes have ripped open the engineering spaces. This is the carrier that launched the Doolittle Raiders against Tokyo just 6 months ago, a strike that shocked the Japanese Empire to its core. Now she's dying. And in exactly 14 days, the United States will have zero, absolutely zero, operational aircraft carriers to stop the Japanese Navy in the entire Pacific Ocean. But what Japan does next will cost them the entire war. And the strategy America uses? It breaks every rule of naval warfare ever written. This is the untold story of the greatest strategic patience in military history. As Flatley circles the dying Hornet, he's doing math in his head. Dark math. The math of catastrophe. USS Lexington, sunk at the Battle of Coral Sea on May 8, 1942. The Lady Lex took multiple torpedo and bomb hits. Her aviation fuel lines ruptured. Internal explosions tore her apart from the inside. 216 men died when she went down. Gone. USS Yorktown, destroyed at the Battle of Midway on June 7, 1942. Despite heroic damage control efforts, Japanese submarine I-168 put 2 torpedoes into her. She capsized and sank with 141 men still fighting to save her. Gone. USS Wasp, torpedoed by Japanese submarine I-19 on September 15, 1942. 3 torpedoes struck in rapid succession. Aviation fuel ignited instantly. The fire spread so fast that 193 men died within minutes. The destroyer USS Lansdowne had to torpedo Wasp to sink her before the Japanese could claim the prize. Gone. And now, USS Hornet, the carrier that proved to America and the world that Japan could be hit, that Tokyo could burn, that the enemy wasn't invincible. Multiple bomb hits, torpedo damage, flooding out of control. At 1:35 on October 27th, after American destroyers failed to sink her with torpedoes, Japanese destroyers would finish the job. For fleet carriers lost in 6 months. In just 6 months, the United States Navy has lost half, exactly half, of its entire Pacific carrier strength. USS Saratoga sits in Pearl Harbor undergoing repairs from torpedo damage. USS Enterprise, the Big E, is limping away from the Battle of Santa Cruz right now, damaged but alive. She's the last operational carrier, but she needs repairs. For 14 days, from late October through early November 1942, the United States Pacific Fleet will have 0 fully operational fleet carriers. Meanwhile, Japan operates 3 fleet carriers freely in Pacific waters. Zuikaku, veteran of Pearl Harbor. Junyo, modern, powerful, dangerous. Hayo, fast, capable, hunting. Every military manual ever written says what happens next. Every naval strategist predicts it. Every historical precedent demands it. One final, climactic, apocalyptic battle between the remaining forces to decide who controls the Pacific Ocean. The decisive fleet engagement that has governed naval thinking since Trafalgar in 1805. The battle that Japan has obsessively trained for. The battle that Japan's entire war strategy depends upon. Admiral Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet, sits in his Pearl Harbor headquarters. He's reviewing the mathematics of disaster. And he makes a choice that will confuse, frustrate, and ultimately destroy Japanese naval planning for the next 2 years. He refuses the battle. But to understand why this choice is so devastating to Japan, you need to understand their obsession. The Japanese called it Kantai Kessen. In English, the Decisive Fleet Battle. May 27, 1905. The Tsushima Strait between Korea and Japan. Admiral Hihikiro Togo, commanding the Japanese combined fleet, spots the Russian Baltic Fleet on the horizon. The Russians had sailed 18,000 miles from the Baltic Sea, around Africa, across the Indian Ocean, through the Pacific, to reach this point. They were exhausted. They were poorly trained. They were about to be annihilated. The battle lasted 2 days. When it ended, the Russian fleet ceased to exist. Of 38 Russian warships, 21 sunk, 7 captured, 6 disarmed in neutral ports, only 4 escaped. Russian casualties, over 4,000 dead. Japanese casualties, 117 dead. This wasn't just a victory. This was the validation of every theory Alfred Thayer Mahan had written about sea power. Two great fleets meet in decisive battle. One fleet is annihilated. The war ends. Control of the sea determines everything. For the next 37 years, the Imperial Japanese Navy built their entire Pacific War strategy around recreating this one battle. Not similar battles. This battle. They wargamed the scenario endlessly at the Naval War College in Tokyo. The script was always the same. Phase 1. American forces advance across the Pacific to relieve the Philippines. Phase 2. Japanese submarines positioned along the route sink 10% of the advancing American fleet. Phase 3. Land-based bombers flying from island bases destroy another 10%. Phase 4. Japanese destroyers launch night torpedo attacks, further reducing American strength. Phase 5. The combined fleet, led by the super battleships Yamato and Musashi with their colossal 18-inch guns, delivers the killing blow in one apocalyptic surface engagement. Total American annihilation. War over. Japan victorious. There was just one problem with this perfect plan. It required American cooperation. At a pre-war Naval War College seminar in 1941, a junior Japanese staff officer raised his hand. He suggested, what if the Americans don't advance predictably toward the Philippines? What if they attack our homeland immediately? What if they do something unexpected? A senior Naval General Staff officer stood up. His response was cold. The campaign against the Philippines has already been decided as operational policy by the Imperial Navy. It is highly regrettable that one should hear arguments rejecting it. Discussion closed. Debate ended. Alternative strategies forbidden. This rigidity went deeper than military planning. It was woven into Japanese military culture. Bushido, the way of the warrior, demanded confronting the enemy directly. Honor required accepting battle when challenged. Retreating, avoiding engagement, fighting defensively, these were shameful. The idea that Americans might deliberately avoid decisive engagement, that they might choose strategic patience over tactical glory, that they might refuse battle when it was offered. This simply did not compute within the Japanese military worldview. Even Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant architect of Pearl Harbor, saw the danger. In September 1940, before the war even started, he warned, if we fight the United States and England, I can run wild for 6 months to a year. But should the war be prolonged for 2 or 3 years, I have no confidence in ultimate victory. Yamamoto understood industrial mathematics. He understood production capacity. He understood that time favored America. His warnings went unheeded. Because while Japan obsessed over Kantai-Kessen, Admiral Nimitz in Washington had received very different guidance. May 17, 1942. Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet, sends a directive to Admiral Nimitz. It's marked secret. The directive contains one paragraph that will govern all Pacific operations for the next 3 years. Employ strong attrition tactics and do not, repeat not, allow our forces to accept decisive action except under favorable circumstances. This is to apply to forces in all categories, including carriers and cruisers. Read that again. Do not allow forces to accept decisive action. The complete opposite of Japanese doctrine. This wasn't cowardice. This wasn't fear. This was cold, brutal mathematics. In 1937, American war-making industrial potential represented 41.7% of total global capacity. Japan's war-making industrial potential was 3.5%, a ratio of nearly 12 to 1. Every American ship lost could be replaced by 12 more. Every American aircraft destroyed could be replaced by 12 more. Every American pilot killed could be replaced by 12 more. Every Japanese loss was permanent, or took years to replace. Time favored America overwhelmingly. Every day the war continued, American industrial power grew while Japanese power declined. The optimal American strategy became crystal clear. 1. Preserve the fleet at all costs. 2. Inflict maximum attrition on the enemy without accepting decisive battle. 3. Wait for American industrial production to bury Japan under an unstoppable tidal wave of steel, aluminum, and firepower. 10 days after King's directive, just before the Battle of Midway, Nimitz translated this into his own operational plan. CINC PAC Operation Plan 29-42. He called it calculated risk. The principle was simple. Avoid exposure to attack by superior enemy forces without good prospect of inflicting greater damage to the enemy in return. Not avoid battle. Not retreat always. But calculated risk. If you can ambush 3 Japanese carriers with 2 American carriers, take the risk. If you're facing 6 Japanese carriers with 2 American carriers in open water, refuse battle. In January 1943, Allied leadership met in Casablanca, Morocco. The Joint Chiefs of Staff issued document CCS 168, Conduct of the War in Pacific Theater in 1943. The directive was explicit. Intensify attrition of the enemy by land, air, and sea. Not seek decisive battle. Not destroy the enemy fleet. Intensify attrition. And the perfect place to implement this strategy had just presented itself. A jungle island in the Solomons. A primitive airstrip called Henderson Field. An island most Americans couldn't even find on a map. Guadalcanal. August 7, 1942. Operation Watchtower. The first American offensive operation of the Pacific War. 19,000 United States Marines storm ashore on Guadalcanal. Their objective, Henderson Field. A partially completed airstrip that the Japanese were building. Control Henderson Field, and you control air superiority over the southern Solomon Islands. Control the Solomons, and you threaten Japanese supply lines to the South Pacific. Lose the Solomons, and Japan's entire defensive perimeter begins to crack. Japan commits to retaking Guadalcanal. Fully commits. Admiral Nimitz recognizes what's happening immediately. Japan is pouring resources into a fixed position. They're committed. They can't retreat without losing face. So Nimitz gives the order. Pin them down. Bleed them. Make them pay for every reinforcement convoy, every supply run, every attempt to land troops. The Japanese start running destroyers down the slot, the channel between the Solomon Islands, every night. They call these runs rat runs. Americans call them the Tokyo Express. And every night becomes a potential battle. The first major engagement happens just 2 days after the landings. August 9, 1942. Savo Island. Japanese cruisers and destroyers catch American and Australian ships by complete surprise in a night battle. In less than 1 hour, Japan sinks 4 Allied heavy cruisers. USS Astoria, USS Quincy, USS Vincennes, HMS Canberra. 1,077 Allied sailors die. It's one of the worst defeats in U.S. Navy history. But Nimitz doesn't pull out. He reinforces. 2 months later, American cruisers get revenge. The Battle of Cape Esperance. Night engagement. This time, Americans catch the Japanese by surprise. 1 Japanese cruiser sunk. 1 destroyer sunk. The attrition continues. The big one comes in mid-November. A 3-day naval brawl that historians will call the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. First night, American cruisers and destroyers tangle with Japanese battleships Hai and Kirishima trying to bombard Henderson Field. Rear Admiral Daniel Callahan's flagship USS San Francisco takes 45 hits. Callahan dies, but the Americans damage Hai so badly she can't escape. American aircraft from Henderson Field and Enterprise find Hai limping away. They sink her. Hai becomes the first Japanese battleship sunk in World War II. The myth of Japanese invincibility continues to crack. Japanese battleship Kirishima tries again. USS Washington's 16-inch guns hammer her at point-blank range. Kirishima sinks. 2 Japanese battleships destroyed in 3 days. The final major engagement comes at the end of November. Battle of Tassafaronga. 8 Japanese destroyers maul an American cruiser force. USS Northampton sinks. 3 cruisers heavily damaged. Japan wins the tactical battle, but loses the strategic war. Here's why. Both sides lose roughly equal numbers of ships in these surface battles. Cruisers, destroyers, some battleships. But for every Japanese destroyer sent to the bottom, that's 1 less screening unit for their carriers. 1 less escort for future operations. 1 less torpedo launcher for the decisive battle they're still planning. And Japan can't replace these losses quickly. America? American shipyards are pumping out destroyers and cruisers on assembly lines. What takes Japan a year to build, America builds in 3 months. The aircraft attrition is even more devastating for Japan. Before the war, Japanese naval aviators were the best in the world. 700-plus flight hours minimum. Many had combat experience in China. Excellent training. Excellent aircraft. Excellent tactics. From August 1942 through February 1943, the air campaign over the Solomons consumes Japanese air groups faster than their training pipeline can replace them. By mid-1943, American fighter pilots start reporting something strange. These new Japanese pilots, they're not as good. They make basic mistakes. Their formations are sloppy. They're easier to shoot down. The veterans are dead. 700-hour experienced pilots are being replaced by 300-hour rookies. Then 200-hour pilots. Then pilots with barely 100 hours. Japan kept experienced pilots in combat continuously until they died. They didn't rotate veterans back to training commands to teach new pilots. They were cannibalizing their future to survive the present. By February 1943, Japan evacuates Guadalcanal. 25,000 Japanese troops dead. Thousands more evacuated as starving, disease-ridden wrecks. American combat deaths, 7,000. General Douglas MacArthur perfectly summarizes the strategic shift. Before Guadalcanal, the enemy advanced at his pleasure. After Guadalcanal, he retreated at ours. But while Japan bled in the Solomons, while their air groups were being systematically destroyed, while their destroyers and cruisers were being ground down, something was happening in American shipyards that would change the course of the entire war. Let's go back to October 1942 for a moment. Remember the situation. One operational carrier, USS Enterprise. Maybe 85 aircraft total. 0 fully operational carriers for 14 days. Now watch what happens. The Essex-class carrier program, the largest class of heavy aircraft carriers ever built in human history, starts hitting the fleet. Pre-war, building an aircraft carrier took 3 to 4 years from keel laying to commissioning. Wartime emergency construction? 14 to 20 months. USS Essex, CV-9, commissioned December 31, 1942. USS Lexington, CV-16, named for the Coral Sea loss. Commissioned February 17, 1943. USS Yorktown, CV-10, named for the Midway casualty. Commissioned April 15, 1943. USS Bunker Hill, CV-17. Commissioned May 24, 1943. USS Intrepid, CV-11. Commissioned August 16, 1943. USS Hornet, CV-12, replacing the Santa Cruz loss. Commissioned November 29, 1943. USS Wasp, CV-18, replacing the submarine casualty. Commissioned November 24, 1943. 7 Essex-class fleet carriers in 1 year. Plus 9 Independence-class light carriers converted from cruiser hulls. American carrier strength has completely transformed. Where October 1942 saw 1 operational carrier, the Navy now fields multiple carrier task groups with over 300 aircraft combined. The aircraft production numbers are even more overwhelming. 1942, United States, 47,836 military aircraft produced. Japan, 8,861 aircraft produced. Ratio, 5.4 to 1. 1943, United States, 85,898 aircraft. Japan, 16,693 aircraft. Ratio, 5.1 to 1. 1944, the knockout punch. United States, 96,318 aircraft produced in 1 year. That's more aircraft than Japan built during the entire war. But carriers and aircraft mean nothing without trained pilots to fly them. Navy pilot training graduates. 1942, 10,869 pilots. 1943, 20,842 pilots. 1944, 21,067 pilots. American pilots receive rigorous training. 3 months pre-flight school, 3 months primary flight training, 3 months intermediate training, advanced specialization, fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, operational training, squadrons, carrier qualification. Minimum 600 flight hours before combat deployment. The entire pipeline takes roughly 2 years from civilian to combat-ready naval aviator. Japan faces the complete opposite trajectory. Pre-war, 700-plus flight hours per pilot. Mid-1943, 300 hours for replacement pilots. Late 1944, 40 hours average. 40 hours. Some Japanese pilots in late 1944 barely know how to land on carriers. Japan reassigned flight instructors from training commands to combat squadrons. They needed bodies in cockpits now, so they sacrificed the future for the present. After the war, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa admitted, lack of trained air crews was more crippling than lack of carriers or aircraft, and the officer who would command this rebuilt American carrier fleet was about to take his positio. N. January 6, 1944. Rear Admiral Mark Andrew Mitscher assumes command of Task Force 58, the Fast Carrier Task Force. Mitscher wasn't flashy. He didn't give dramatic speeches. He didn't seek glory. He was effective. He commanded USS Hornet during the Doolittle Raid, the mission that proved Tokyo could be hit. He commanded Air Solomon Islands at Guadalcanal, coordinating Navy, Marine Corps, Army Air Forces, and Royal New Zealand Air Force aircraft in brutal daily combat. Under Mitscher's command at Guadalcanal, his pilots destroyed 340 Japanese fighters in air-to-air combat, destroyed 132 Japanese bombers, sank 17 ships, damaged 8 more. And his greatest achievement, April 18, 1943. Operation Vengeance. American codebreakers intercepted Admiral Yamamoto's inspection itinerary. 18p. 38 Lightnings launched from Henderson Field, operating under Mitscher's orders. 310 miles from Guadalcanal. Lieutenant Rex Barber's P-38 put 20mm cannon shells into Yamamoto's transport. The G-4M Betty bomber plunged into the jungle. Yamamoto died instantly. The loss of the combined fleet commander represented attrition warfare's ultimate expression. Not just ships, not just aircraft, but irreplaceable leadership. Now Mitscher commanded everything Nimitz's patience had built. Mitscher determined carriers were best defended operating in groups of 3 to 4. His optimal task force composition. For aircraft carriers 6 to 8 cruisers and battleships for anti-aircraft support not less than 18 destroyers, preferably 24. Carriers in the center. Battleships and cruisers in the next ring. Destroyers screening the perimeter. And Mitscher had a new weapon, the F-6F Hellcat, specifically engineered to counter the A-6M0. Superior in speed, firepower, armor, protection, diving ability. Wartime kill ratio against the 0, 13 to 1. Hellcats would destroy 5,163 Japanese aircraft, 75% of the Navy's total Pacific kills. The Hellcat would produce 305 American aces. By June 1944, the transformation was complete. Japan had been waiting 2 years for Kantai-Kessen, for the decisive battle. It was finally coming, but not the way they imagined. June 19th to 20th, 1944. The Philippines Sea. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa commands the Japanese mobile fleet. 9 aircraft carriers, 5 battleships, approximately 450 aircraft. Admiral Mark Mitscher commands Task Force 58. 15 aircraft carriers, 7 battleships, 956 aircraft. It's not even close. The first day becomes known to history as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Japan launches 4 massive attack waves. 373 aircraft total. American radar picks them up 150 miles out. Fighter directors vector Hellcats to intercept. Of 373 attacking Japanese aircraft, only 130 returned to their carriers. 243 shot down. Approximately 15 to 1. Japanese carriers lose 315 of 423 embarked aircraft. 74% of their air groups. While the air battle rages, American submarines USS Albacore and USS Kavala stalk Japanese carriers. Albacore torpedoes the brand-new carrier Taiho. One hit, but fuel vapor from ruptured aviation fuel tanks spreads through the ship. 7 hours later, massive internal explosion. Taiho sinks. 1,650 men die. Kavala puts 4 torpedoes into the veteran carrier Shokaku. The Pearl Harbor veteran erupts in flames. She sinks 3 hours later. On the second day, Mitscher makes a controversial decision. He orders a long-range strike against the retreating Japanese fleet. The range is extreme, 300-plus miles. Aircraft will have to return after dark. Many pilots have never landed on a carrier at night. 216 American aircraft launch. They find the Japanese fleet late in the afternoon. Torpedo bombers hit the carrier Hyo. She explodes and sinks. The American aircraft struggle back in darkness. Many run out of fuel. Mitscher orders, turn on the lights. Every ship in Task Force 58 lights up. Searchlights, running lights, deck lights. Get those planes aboard. 80 American aircraft lost, but most crews rescued. Admiral Ozawa began the Battle of the Philippine Sea with 450 aircraft. He ended with 102 operational. 3 fleet carriers sunk. 29 aircraft lost in aerial combat. 123 total, including the night recovery operations. This wasn't just a victory. This was annihilation. The decisive battle Japan had sought for 40 years. But they were on the receiving end. Japan never again employed carriers offensively. Kamikaze suicide tactics became the only remaining method to threaten American naval power. Japanese naval aviation as a fighting force ceased to exist. Let's return to where we started. October 1942. 1 damaged carrier. 85 aircraft. 0 fully operational carriers for 14 days. June 1944. 15 carriers. 956 aircraft. 15-to-1 kill ratio. Overwhelming dominance. Admiral Nimitz's decision to reject Decisive Battle in 1942 wasn't cowardice. It wasn't fear. It was cold strategic calculation. Nimitz refused battle. Not in late 1942, when American carriers nearly ceased to exist. Not in 1943, when the balance began shifting. Not until American strength became so overwhelming that when Decisive Battle came, it destroyed Japanese naval aviation completely. Japan's entire strategy depended on forcing America into one climactic engagement. Kantai-Kessen, the decisive battle. Nimitz refused to cooperate. Instead, he chose strategic patience over tactical glory, attrition over decision, industrial mathematics over naval tradition. Every day Nimitz delayed the decisive battle. Another Essex-class carrier commissioned another 100 pilots, graduated training another 1,000 aircraft, rolled off production lines. Another Japanese veteran pilot died unreplaced. Admiral Agaki Matome, Yamamoto's chief of staff, wrote in his diary before his final kamikaze flight in August 1945, "Why didn't we attack enemy elements easy to destroy instead of always seeking decisive battle?" Doctrinal blindness. Cultural rigidity. The inability to imagine that the enemy might not follow your script. By the time Japanese commanders recognized Americans weren't playing by their rules, the game was already over. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from the battle you win, but from the battle you refuse to fight. This is WW2 Footsteps. If you want more untold stories from World War II, the strategies, the battles, the decisions that changed history, subscribe and smash that notification bell. Drop a comment right now. If you were Admiral Nimitz in October 1942 with 0 carriers, would you risk everything in one battle? Or would you wait? I want to know what you think. Next video, the single bombing mission that killed more people than the atomic bombs. Most people have never heard of it. I'll see you there.